The Ford Flathead V8 changed American cars forever. But what if I told you it was also a massive mistake? That the very engine that made hot rods roar and helped win a world war was also prone to overheating, cracked under pressure, and got completely outclassed by its rivals within just a few years. The truth is, while the Flathead V8 made V8 power affordable for the first time in history, it also introduced a wave of engineering problems that still get debated to this day. Was it a mechanical marvel or a nostalgic relic running on reputation alone? Stick around, because the truth behind this engine will leave you questioning everything. The birth of a legend, Ford's wild gamble. In the early 1930s, America was struggling. The Great Depression had crushed jobs, destroyed businesses, and brought the automotive industry to its knees. Most car makers were just trying to stay alive, focusing on simple, low-cost vehicles that could appeal to a cash-strapped population. Building something bold, something big and powerful, was the last thing on anyone's mind. But Henry Ford didn't follow the crowd. He wanted to shake the market to its core by putting a V8 engine, something that had always been reserved for the rich, into a car that everyday people could afford. This was unheard of at the time. V8 engines were considered exotic, complex, and expensive to build. Companies like Cadillac had them, but nobody expected a working-class brand like Ford to attempt such a bold move. Yet that's exactly what they did. Henry Ford, despite being notoriously stubborn and difficult to work with, pushed his engineers to find a way to cast a V8 engine block as a single piece of metal, a feat that most thought impossible in the early 1930s. But after years of failed attempts, cracked blocks, and mountains of scrap iron, the team finally cracked it. In 1932, Ford released the Model 18, the first affordable car in American history to come standard with a V8 engine. And not just any V8. This was the legendary Flathead, a 65 horsepower motor that would go on to change the face of car culture forever. Why it blew everyone's minds in 1932. When the Ford Flathead V8 hit the streets in 1932, it wasn't just a new engine, it was a revolution on wheels. Nothing like it had ever been seen before in the American car market. At a time when V8 engines were reserved for luxury cars and cost a small fortune, Ford threw the rulebook out the window. The Model 18, powered by this brand new V8, was priced under $500. Shockingly affordable for the average working American. In the depths of the Great Depression, when people were counting every dollar, Ford was offering raw power and smooth performance at a price no one could believe. The engine itself was a revelation. With 65 horsepower and loads of low-end torque, it gave everyday drivers the kind of acceleration and pulling power they had only dreamed of. It didn't just perform well, it sounded like thunder. That low, rumbling exhaust note became iconic. It was the first time a family car could growl like a race car, and people couldn't get enough of it. Sales exploded almost overnight. Ford moved nearly 300,000 V8-powered cars in that first year alone, and demand just kept climbing. But it wasn't just suburban dads lining up at the dealership. Bootleggers operating in the shadows of Prohibition saw the Flathead's true potential. It was faster than most police cars, rugged enough for back roads and cheap enough to ditch if needed. Moonshiners took to it, gangsters used it, and once Prohibition ended, a new wave of thrill seekers took over. Teenagers and young adults looking to go fast for cheap. They hit the junkyards, pulled out Flathead-powered Fords, chopped them, stripped them, and raced them across dry lake beds and open roads. The Flathead V8 didn't just power cars. It ignited a cultural wildfire. It became the heartbeat of the hot rod scene, a mechanical symbol of rebellion, freedom, and youth. It wasn't just an engine, it was a revolution with wheels. The dark side no one talks about, but as much as people love the Flathead, it wasn't all glory. Beneath the roar of its exhaust and the chrome of its intake, the engine had some serious problems. One of the biggest flaws? It ran hot, very hot. The Flathead's exhaust gases actually passed through the water jackets of the engine block, meaning that the engine basically heated its own cooling system from the inside. On warm days or under heavy load, the engine often overheated, Drivers in southern states constantly battled rising temperatures, and even in cooler climates, overheating was a regular headache. The design also led to another major issue: cracking. The cast iron block, while great for mass production, was prone to stress fractures, especially when modified for more power. Many Flathead owners found out the hard way that pushing the engine too far could leave them with a cracked block and a very expensive problem. Even more frustrating, the engine's performance didn't keep up with the times. While it was groundbreaking in 1932, by the 1940s, other manufacturers had started to develop overhead valve engines that breathed better, ran cooler, and made more power with less effort. Oldsmobile introduced the Rocket V8 in 1949, an overhead valve monster that made 135 horsepower right out of the box. Chrysler followed with the Firepower Hemi in 1951, a masterpiece of engineering that made the Flathead look like ancient history. Ford's once revolutionary V8 was quickly being outclassed, and the cracks, both literal and figurative, were starting to show. The Flathead goes to war. Still, before its decline on the street, the Flathead played a surprising role on the battlefield. When World War II broke out, Ford's V8 engine was pressed into military service in trucks, tanks, and even amphibious vehicles. The military loved it for its simplicity. It was easy to fix in the field, ran on low-octane fuel, and didn't require a ton of special tools. For soldiers far from home, that reliability made all the difference. In fact, in some battles, German troops even salvaged abandoned American vehicles and kept the Flatheads running. That says a lot about how dependable these engines could be when maintained properly. The war gave the Flathead a second life, and when soldiers came home, many brought their love for the engine with them. They started building hot rods, customizing old Fords, and creating a culture that's still alive today. The war may have proven the Flathead's toughness, but back on the streets of post-war America, it was clear the engine's days were numbered. Hot rod heaven or engineering hell? By the late 1940s and early 1950s, the Flathead V8 had become the unofficial engine of the American hot rod scene. Young car enthusiasts loved it because it was everywhere. You could pick up an old Flathead-powered Ford for cheap, pull it into your garage, and with some basic tools start building your dream car. Aftermarket parts exploded in popularity. Companies like Edelbrock, Navarro, and Offenhauser made high-performance heads, multi-carburetor intakes, cams, and ignition kits designed specifically for the Flathead. Some of the wildest Flathead builds pushed out over 200 horsepower. An incredible figure at the time, the sound of a Flathead with open headers became the soundtrack of a generation. But the engine's flaws were still there. Even the best-tuned Flathead still struggled with cooling, limited airflow, and power ceilings. You could spend thousands trying to build a fast Flathead, only to be smoked by a bone-stock Chevy small block. And that's where the debate really began. Was it worth the trouble? Was the Flathead all about soul? Or was it just holding back serious performance? Was it overrated all along? Let's be honest. When you strip away the nostalgia, the Flathead doesn't compare to what came after it. Overhead valve engines like the Rocket 88 and the Chevy small block made more power, ran cooler, and were easier to modify for serious performance. Even Ford themselves eventually moved on, replacing the Flathead with their own OHV engines by the mid-1950s. The Flathead was slow to evolve, and by the time it left production in 1953, it was considered outdated by almost every metric. Its design, once revolutionary, had become a bottleneck. It had poor breathing capabilities due to the side valve layout. The combustion chambers were inefficient, and the overheating issues never fully went away. But despite all that, people didn't give up on it. The Flathead Revival, and why it still matters today, over 90 years after it first hit the road, the Ford Flathead V8 is still alive. Not just in restored classics, but in the hearts of gearheads around the world. Why? Because it represents something bigger than specs or horsepower. It stands for a moment when performance became democratic, when a regular guy could afford a V8, open his garage, and start building something fast. There's been a Flathead revival in recent years. Builders all over the country are restoring old blocks, machining new heads, and even fabricating custom cooling systems to keep these beasts alive. At car shows and cruise nights, Flatheads still draw crowds. People love the look, the sound, the history, and yeah, maybe even the challenge. It's not the fastest, it's not the coolest running, but the Flathead has soul, and for many that's what matters most. So here's the shocking truth. The Ford Flathead V8 was both a masterpiece and a mess. It launched American car culture into overdrive, gave birth to the hot rod scene, and showed the world that speed wasn't just for the elite, but it also came with real flaws, ones that modern engines solved decades ago. Whether you see it as a groundbreaking innovation or an overrated hunk of cast iron, you can't deny its place in history. Now it's your turn. Do you think the Flathead V8 was a flawed icon or an overrated dinosaur? Let us know in the comments below. And if you're into real car stories, legendary engines, and the wild twists of automotive history, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell so you never miss what's coming next. We've got a lot more in the tank. And trust me, you don't want to miss it. See you next time.